So, I finally did it, guys. Despite my better judgment, I finally watched the Dungeons & Dragons movie, No Honor Among Thieves. Yes, the movie made by that not-so-great company, Wizards of the Coast, owned by Hasbro, the company that very much loves to take advantage of their main primary fan base, the Dungeons & Dragons community. However, though, I have to give them credit where credit's due. While Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves isn't the best movie I've ever seen, it's not even like amazing work of art as a movie or piece of cinema by any means, it was a fun movie, a fun time. But it did have some problems. So essentially, Dungeons & Dragons No Honors Among Thieves is kind of a buddy heist movie all wrapped up in this kind of Dungeons & Dragons shell. We are introduced to our main characters: Ed, the witty bard; Holga, the hulking beat-em-up barbarian; Simon, the not-so-confident sorcerer; and Dorich, however you say her name, the red-headed tiefling druid. Essentially, our plot is kind of twofold. While the main storyline is to stop these group of evil baddies, these red wizards, from doing whatever the heck it is they are doing, some bad evil things, the secondary story of the plot is this relationship between Ed and his daughter Kira. While simultaneously they are trying to steal this treasure from this group of bad people, Ed is trying to reclaim the love and reclaim his daughter, who has also been stolen and kind of brainwashed away from him. In many ways, this movie has kind of Marvel-esque movie qualities. It really feels a lot kind of like Guardians of the Galaxy in its tone and its kind of light-hearted nature, as this movie is very much a comedy. There's not a lot of serious things going on, and even in many of the serious scenes, you can't help but take many of the things lightly just because of the overall tone of the movie and the constant use of jokes. In many ways, I have to say I'm actually super surprised about how specific and how much of a niche they made this movie. When I heard that they were making a Dungeons & Dragons movie based off of the world, the Forgotten Realms world and lore, I didn't think it was going to be this in-depth. Something that is cool for the Dungeons & Dragons fan, but in many ways is also confusing for the general wide audience. It seems at times like this movie, Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves, couldn't decide what its target audience was. Was it trying to target the hardcore niche D&D fans, or trying to be this jack-of-all-trades movie that appeals to all? I think this is where a lot of the problems come with this movie, as it does feel like if you're not an intense Dungeons & Dragons fan, it's hard to really get a lot of the sense of what's going on or a lot of the references. I've been a Dungeons & Dragons fan for a long-ass time. I have pretty decent knowledge of the Forgotten Realms world, but even I didn't know a lot of stuff that was going on or get a lot of references at times, so I can only imagine how someone who's just maybe a minor Dungeons & Dragons fan or has never really played in a Forgotten Realms world, they would have no idea what was going on. I've compared this movie a couple of times in conversation to Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, the Harry Potter movie, because in many ways, that movie, the Harry Potter movie, was a kind of fan service movie for the fans. One of the biggest things about that movie is a Harry Potter fan being able to walk in and be like, oh, look at all of these crazy things from the Harry Potter universe that I can identify, I can reference. In many ways, this was kind of the same for the Dungeons & Dragons movie. Throughout the movie, you can't help but notice all the very more obvious D&D references, like the creatures or the meta of the movie as a whole, as very much it is a meta movie. They constantly make Dungeons & Dragons references and Dungeons & Dragons jokes all the time. Now, all of these aren't a bad thing. I found these jokes very funny, but again, it kind of paints this very interesting picture. This movie, in many ways, felt like big fan service for a D&D audience. It felt like the people at Wizards were almost like making a movie for themselves to show off their world that they have kind of created. And I have to give them credit. They do a good job. It was a fun movie. In all honesty, I think where this movie shines is in many of the action scenes. One of my favorite scenes occurring kind of early on in the movie, where our druid character has a big epic chase throughout the city of Neverwinter, where they are constantly forced to wild shape into many different creatures. This was a super fun, awesome scene, and the Dungeons & Dragons movie does a good job at creating many different scenes like this. They are good at creating these D&D action scenes where we see different features from D&D, whether it be spells, class features, monsters, what have you, all being used and done in real time in this world, in this live action world. They do an awesome job at displaying the D&D spells in a very, very fun way, regardless if you exactly know what all of the references that are being made are. I mean, hell, they even snuck a Critical Role reference into the movie with a certain character, our wizard, our sorcerer Simon, mentioning a certain smell, fresh cut grass. Bringing me on to Simon. Simon is probably my favorite character throughout this entire show, especially from our main group of characters. I didn't dislike any of our main group of characters, but I have to say, the movie attempts to make you care about the characters by giving you a kind of little taste of each of their backstories, but a lot of them are just really simple. They're kind of vanilla, and you don't really care that much. Simon was really the character that I cared the most about, as he was kind of the most fun, interesting, and honestly the character that felt the most real in how they were being portrayed. I am genuinely surprised, though. The movie was better than I thought it was going to be. Maybe that's my hate for Wizards of the Coast and everything that they do, but I will give them credit here. The movie itself wasn't bad, but I don't know if we can necessarily call it a success. They spent an ass ton of money making this movie. I don't know what exactly the production budget was, but we can find out real quick. Apparently, according to this quick Google search, their budget was around 150 million US dollars. Now, I think this is specifically for the production of the movie, because I know for a fact that they dropped an insane amount of money on advertising this movie. Commercials for this thing were absolutely everywhere, which was also hilarious, seeing as they were releasing this movie in the wake of the OGL, the Wizards of the Coast OGL drama fiasco. Safe to say Wizards hasn't had a good time with PR as of late, but somehow this really didn't seem to affect the release of their movie. This movie really goes above and beyond to try to make it itself feel like as Dungeons and Dragon-y as possible. It really feels like they're trying to make the story feel like a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, not a movie, which I think maybe is why the story feels as kind of oddly paced as it does. Side note, I do have to say that while the effects and everything about visually with the movie was great, there really was nothing wrong with it in that aspect. It was probably the strongest part of the movie. I do have to say, though, that most of the non-human characters, creatures in the movie were terrifying, whether it was the Aarakocra or the Catfolk. They were absolutely horrifying. Overall, the Dungeons & Dragons movie was honestly better than it probably had any right to be. Not like it's going to be winning any awards, any artistic awards. It isn't groundbreaking in any kind of artistic media sense, but it does do a good job, I think, in maybe its primary focus, which is overall to have fun. While I do think they possibly made the movie a little too niche to the Dungeons & Dragons Forgotten Realms universe, as who the heck besides like a super hardcore Wizards of the Coast Forgotten Realms fan would understand all of the references being thrown at them? So how can I expect a casual, let alone a non-D&D fan, to understand what the heck is going on in this movie at times? I think at the end of the day, they do a good job of making this movie just a fun time. It doesn't take itself too seriously, maybe sometimes for its detriment, as some of the more dramatic scenes don't really come off as dramatic, as the movie just has this kind of playful attitude throughout its entirety. But I do have to say, as much as it pains me because of how much I dislike Wizards of the Coast, this movie was good. It was fun. It was a good time. If I had to give it a rating, I'd probably give it a 7 out of 10, because at the very least, it left me with this fun feeling at the end. As well, it seems like they're teasing a second Dungeons & Dragons movie to come out in the future. I don't know. Maybe I'm just jaded because of my dislike of Wizards of the Coast. Let me know in the comments down below, what did you think of Dungeons & Dragons No Honor Among Thieves? It wasn't a bad movie by any stretch of the imagination. If anything, it was better than I honestly thought it was going to be. I think its strongest parts are the more action-oriented scenes. The scenes that get to play with all of the fun aspects of a Dungeons & Dragons world, whether it be the magic of the world, the creatures of the world, or just overall the kind of humor, whimsical nature of the world. As always, guys, if you enjoyed the video, learned something new, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. If you're curious as to why I dislike Wizards of the Coast so much, then click the video on screen now, where you can learn how this billion-dollar company lost to a group of angry D&D nerds. As always, guys, I hope to see you in the next one. Stay safe out there. Until next time, peace, love, Adu.
Couldn't no one tell us nothing. That night was ours. All the stars aligned and you were so damn fine. Yeah, it was young love.